All right, we're going to bring in Professor Cruff again from UNC Charlotte. These results are rolling in slowly. Professor, as you know, I think a lot of folks who, I was kind of talking a little bit about election security, right? And a lot of people talk about having paper ballots, but sometimes when you have paper ballots and you also have electronics that have to work simultaneously together, it takes a little bit for these results to roll in, of course. So we're seeing some of that, but anything that kind of piqued your interest right now?
Well, I'll just say that, one reason why, so the election results for early voting and for most of the absentee votes
Yeah.
used to roll in right at 7:30, but the state legislature changed the laws about when election boards could start counting their ballots. So, and those early votes are not going to roll in. And so, just by way of pointing out in Mecklenburg County, it's worth noting that they use ballot marking devices, and those ballot marking devices actually, you print out your paper, and then you put it in a collection unit.
Right.
And I guess it always takes time to get the results from the outlying areas. In Mecklenburg County, the results usually come the places closest to 741 Kenilworth, which is where the election board office is, more quickly.
Right.
But there's a lot of checking and double checking that election officials at the polls need to do to make sure every I is dotted and T crossed. So it takes some time.
It does.
But in terms of like the election itself, I think that turned out, I think that people were engaged in the transit tax.
Yeah.
I think there was a lot more discussion. This is like a unique time for us now, right? That we're actually able to vote on a larger plan for the county. And so it's worth noting that it could increase voter turnout, but we're still not seeing what the results are tonight. As I noted before, about 7% of the registered voters voted before Election Day. 7.8 actually. So, that could portend that some people are excited, and especially especially the zip codes around the Lake Norman area.
Yeah.
Among early voters, that was the highest number of early voters were from the Lake Norman area.
Yeah, fascinating to hear from Nixon Norman up near Greensboro, to hear that turnout was low and people aren't as engaged there. Yeah, interesting to hear. And I wanted to just talk about Davidson Board of Commissioners. Those numbers are in, and I know you live in that area. Is there anybody on that ballot between David Lusk, who is right now up? He has 32.98% of the vote. They don't have any precincts reporting at this point, so I'm sure those are rolling in. But it's still very early, only 94 total votes right now. So between all of those candidates, it seems like Lusk is a favorite, and probably was a favorite in this respect. Do you know any of these candidates?
So I'll tell you, I haven't paid a lot of attention to Davidson.
Okay.
It's not that I don't care. But,
Right.
I think in the hubbub and even my own personal deciding about the transit tax,
Yeah.
I didn't get to those as much. I do live in Mecklenburg County. Sorry.
Makes sense. Same. I would be in the same boat. So understandably so. Let's talk a little bit about the Board of Education for Charlotte-Mecklenburg County. It seems like District 1, we've got District 2, 4, 5, 6, who are all up for elections here. As we know, right, there's been a lot of discussion about CMS and in this intervention of AI, right? There's been a lot of talk about policies around this. It seems to be that whatever policies are going to come out from this, right, it seems to be shaping what this board could look like. And of course, again, the future for CMS as well. What do you think in terms
AI, I mean, it is something that every school district really needs to consider, and universities as well.
Yeah.
You're right. It is a controversial issue, and it will be continue to be a controversial issue. I think we just need to grapple with what we can do with AI and how to teach our kids. And yeah, the new school board, that's something that they're definitely on board to discuss. But whether the voters are able to connect something like AI that, a lot of people probably just in their normal lives aren't really thinking about to right now, unless, it, some attention to this, but probably not as much as you would expect given what teachers are saying, but like me. But I will say that that's definitely something that will, decisions. But I think the policy is to consider trying to teach the kids how to use it,
Right.
because it's just like a calculator, something, right? That
Yeah.
at some point, we thought we all needed to do our, addition and subtraction and the basics.
Right.
And maybe we still do, but we're also a lot more productive with calculators and computers than we might have been before.
That's right.
So-
That makes a good point. The District 6 race in city council is interesting to me. You have Tark Bukhari, right, who left the seat
Yep.
to join the Trump administration. His wife now, obviously,
His wife is going for the
right,
position. Yeah.
right. Interesting to see this race. She seems to be the favorite in this race as well because people know her name, right? It'll be
it's a
interesting.
name recognition, yeah.
Right, right.
But you know what? This happens to a lot of women candidates. Like they start their careers partially because they, maybe their husbands, took a position,
Yeah.
different position,
Yeah.
or they got on the ballot. Maybe their husband died, and so a real start for a lot of candidates that are women is at the local level. And so who knows, what'll turn out. Maybe she'll get a position in a higher position. But yes, the name recognition is important.
Yes. Well, and like I was going to say, I mean, that's a district that is watched a lot. There's a lot of development in that area as well, right? So I think a lot of folks are patiently watching and waiting.
And I keep looking over here to see what the results are saying. So I hope you don't
Same.
mind too much.
No, not at all. Not at all. If you see something,
I
let
don't
me
have
know.
someone talking to me. So
Yes. No. Yeah. Just let
and
me
I
know if you
still
see
don't-
anything.
I don't.
Okay.
I don't.
It'll take some time, as you were saying. It's a process. It's not immediate.
It is, and it
of
doesn't
course,
mean that there's a problem with the process.
right.
Right. It's just that, again, the local election officials, Michael Dickerson, our election director, they're trying to make sure that their I's are dotted and their T's are crossed.
Right.
But it's also a process because new state laws regarding when they could be counting
Right.
ballots.
Well,
So,
and I'll
yeah.
just run through the election night reporting timeline. I was telling folks before, right? Polls closed at 7:30. From 7:30 to 9, it seemed like absentee by mail votes, they had to be approved by County Board of Elections and then reported, right? And then from 8 to 9:30, there are a lot of things happening at that time. And there are only so many people to count these and to make sure things are going, right? They don't have a plethora of individuals, hundreds of individuals doing this. So there's a specific number of folks that are going through this. And so from 8 to 9:30, precinct officials handing deliver results to CBEs, right? That's a big part of this process at this point, people driving and trying to get to those locations. So no, it's a great point.
People driving into the election board.
Right. It's a great point. And it's not easy to get there in Charlotte.
I've been there on election night before and seen the troop of cars coming in.
Yeah.
But some polls, I'm sure there were just a million people standing in line waiting to get in there at the last minute. But sometimes polls stay open a little bit late because if you're in line, you get to vote, right? Even if but I'm sure that doesn't happen in a municipal election. But it can be a process to shut down the polls and get them done.
Yeah. So it is a whole process,
Poll worker,
folks.
you can find out too.
That's right. That's right. They need poll workers. That's a great push
They
right
do.
there. I do want to talk about something that I thought was very interesting. I was talking with our reporter Julie Kay, who's still in house with us, about how I spoke with Lee Altman probably about a year ago about a story that I wanted to do about transit, right? The transit sales tax specifically. And she alluded at that point, right, that no matter what was said, negative or positive, she didn't really want to say anything at that moment because it was in Raleigh at that moment. And needed to be approved there by legislators to be put on the ballot. Can you explain why that process happened the way it did in North Carolina for us? Because it doesn't happen like that everywhere. And I just thought it was very interesting.
Well, so first off, know that North Carolina laws on referendums and ballot measures like that, they're different in every state. So you know that some states can actually, by initiative, put ballot measures on the ballot by just getting a bunch of signatures, though usually a state legislature or the courts have to approve them beforehand. So for anything that comes before us, though, the state legislature would typically, and then the county commission then, approved it as well, getting it on the ballot here in Mecklenburg County. So it requires through state law their approval in order for us to be able to consider it. So it took time to get that approval. So, a lot of Democrats in the area were saying, the Republicans are ignoring us. And suddenly through, circumstances coming together, Representative Cotham sponsored a bill and the Republicans bought into it. Maybe because of compromises made on what was going to go into the bill in terms of roads, that's speculation that I'm not really prepared to get into.
Right.
I think we could sure look at some of the things that they compromised and did, but nevertheless, it's rather an opportunity for us. And whether or not, I guess the real question is what would happen if it didn't pass. I think that would mean that we'd have to go back and then maybe rewrite some of that legislation to get it back. Yeah. Change the time frame. But in any case, it was just a crazy coming together of circumstances that allowed us to do it at this time. Because in the past, we just haven't been able to. The state legislature didn't let us. I mean, we have had a few transit and other sales tax changes. But for this, circumstances, including, having Norfolk Southern sell the city, part of the heavy rail over on on that side of the city along Old Statesville. It's a lot of circumstances. So again, every state does it differently. We aren't allowed to do initiatives in North Carolina. It's simply the state law and the Constitution coming together. But referenda, we do consider ballot measures. And as you probably notice over the years, we've had a lot of different sales tax measures, bond measures for the school districts. And so it's just different in every state because that's the way we run elections in this country.
Well, and you talked about where do we go if this doesn't pass? And in fact, there is no plan B. They've been very, very upfront about the fact that you're right. If this are candid, right? If this doesn't happen, we don't know what else to do. And I guess that's my fear is. I'm sure there's probably some thought as to what could happen, right? But if the voters overwhelmingly reject this, I mean, I think it would be unpopular to go forward with it, right? And then you have the whole thought about how you're going to pay for it.
Right. I mean, that's when you have something rejected like that.
Yeah.
You do have to go back and think about, what are the voters saying? Who's turning out? Why do we think they're making those decisions? Was it something about the current time? Right, because right now is not a good time with the government shutdown and the changes in the presidential administration, have made. And the real question is, we'll get a chance to do this later. Will we? And I think we honestly don't know for sure, but sometimes communities will try over and over again for different things like stadium funding or whatnot.
Right.
It happens many times. Will it? I don't think it'll go. If it does not pass, it shouldn't be overwhelming. I mean, I think there was. As I said earlier, tonight, I noted that the 10% of the early voters, which was a record number of early voters, not necessarily because they were excited about transit, right? Because early voting has been trending up in record levels in many different places, and it was record tonight for a local. I would say that you know, those areas that are affected by the red line, and I didn't get a chance to overlay it. I just checked certain zip codes and who had voted. But up in Lake Norman and around, and the zip codes around there, definitely people turned out. Now, we don't know what those results are yet. All they report to us is who turned out. But they don't tell us, who they are. We know about 30% of the people who turned out early. It's just one indicator, right? Or we're African American, which, if you look at the distribution of whites and blacks of the early voters, they're about the same as they always are. But the zip code is interesting. The average age was older. If you wanted to make the argument that younger people were going to support light rail because of the problems of housing right now and not being able to get homes, it's not clear to me that the younger people were so excited that they turned out to vote early. Yeah, like I said, average age 58, 59 years old from my calculations. So I don't think it's going to go down to defeat. But it's the audiences that I think would obviously support it were, they're definitely in the northern zip codes around Lake Norman and around Old Statesville, and that is definitely a pattern I saw when I was looking at the data.
All right. Well, appreciate you fielding that round of questions for us, Professor Kropf.